Welcome to OTR Debate, our off-the-record podcast where three lawyers debate all things while managing to find out how it all comes back to the law. I'm Wee, I work in legislation, and I'll be the judge of this episode. I'm here with our two debaters.
Hi, I'm Muchi. Nice to meet you. I work in immigration.
I'm Lando. I'm a prosecutor.
And this week's episode, we're going to be talking about two shows, Umbrella Academy and The Boys. Muchi, which one are you going to be?
The Boys. Amazon's The Boys.
Okay.
Lando?
I'm doing the Umbrella Academy. That's on Netflix.
All right.
So a little bit better than Amazon, I would think.
In some ways.
Yeah, in some ways.
Some major ways.
As always, the format is much like a trial in that we'll have our opening statements, followed by questions by me, the judge, a brief recess, and then closing arguments. So, are we ready to get into the openings?
Yeah, I'm ready to start.
Yeah, let's do it. Mooch?
Yeah, going for it. So The Boys is it's basically an over-the-top satire of superhero comics and superhero movies, media in general, but also by extension a satire of American politics and society, media, entertainment, etc. So these the point of view of the show, of the series, is basically what if these superheroes that we all know and love, if they existed in the real world, they'd actually really be huge pieces of shit, basically. And they would portray this air of being the heroes that protect the world, but instead, behind closed doors, be really awful, horrible people. Essentially, the inciting incident of the show is Huey, one of the main characters, really, is with his girlfriend, and she gets run through by the member with super speed, A-Train, and just completely destroyed. So she dies right away, and he
Gets
is
run
like,
through by A-Train.
yes.
Okay.
Maybe that was no. And he is pretty much inspired to seek revenge, especially when he sees A-Train like making fun of the incident instead of outwardly showing remorse. He does, but he's making fun of it more in private. So he joins up with Billy Butcher's team, the Boys, the titular Boys, and they start going after the Seven and other soups. So through its over-the-top violence and irreverent sense of humor, it's often shocking, but also that provides a kind of counterpoint to the oversaturation of Marvel and DC movies that we see of these kind of goody-goody heroes saving the planet. Because if they happened in the real world, they'd probably be horrible people because the power would go to their head.
Okay. All right. Lando?
Yeah. So the Umbrella Academy. Rich man, Reginald Hargreaves, adopts 7 babies that were born at the same time around the world from these women that earlier in the day, that same very day, they were not pregnant. So within the course of a day, they all of a sudden just like pop out these babies, and it just comes out of nowhere. The kids grow up. After he adopts them, the kids grow up. They possess all these different powers. And he essentially, because he's very removed from them, he doesn't really call himself their father. He's kind of just like this guy that essentially owns them, and they're like an investment to him, essentially. So he numbers them. There's 1 through 7. 1, Luther, he's like super strong. 2, Diego, he has super aim where he's like throws stuff and he like knows where it's gonna go. Allison's number 3. She can mind control people by saying that I heard a rumor. Like if I went to Wee and I was like, I heard a rumor that you punched Moochie in the face, you would do it. So you want to do? You want to do?
I don't you're not number 3. So.
Klaus is number 4. He talks to dead people. 5, it just goes by 5, and he teleports. 6, Ben. He has like this tentacle monster that comes out of him. It's like crazy. And 7, Vanya. Or Victor in the show has like this vibration force that comes out through music. She plays a violin, and it's seen in the comics and seen in the TV series as this like intense like moment with her and the violin. But through all the dysfunction of them being raised by this adoptive strict father that's basically training them to save the world, because they have each other, they become this family. With that adoptive father, but they also have a robot mother and a talking chimpanzee that actually acts more like their father figure than Reginald Hargreaves does. So show's super interesting, comics really interesting. It just on its face looks enticing, because there's this talking monkey, like this robot, and then there's various things, images and like characters that just look very unique, and it's like, what's going on with this person? So great show, great comic. So
All right, cool, thanks. So my first question, and Muji kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, I think we're all in agreement that society over the past several years has been facing and continues to face superhero fatigue. So I kind of want to know what makes your shows or books unique, and do you think that they stand out from kind of the overload and saturation of the content in this genre?
Well, yeah, The Boys, as I said in the opening, kind of directly satirizes that very thing. In universe, there are comics at times, or movies, or products, or entertainment that are revolving around the main heroes, the Seven, owned by the Vought Corporation. So, like, they'll star in their own movies, of course, making themselves look good, or hold reality shows for competition for who's going to be the next member of the Seven, and also appear in like misguided corporate PR. PR events and campaigns. So, for example, there is A Train, where he promotes his energy drink, and there's an ad that he does where there's protesters and cops in like riot gear and stuff, and he comes with his energy drink and gives it to the cops, and they all start drinking it, and then everyone's drinking and partying.
it's like a beautiful moment.
Pretty much directly making fun of like the Kendall Jenner Pepsi ad from like 7 years ago, whatever it was. So, like, stuff like that is like pretty. It doesn't just satirize superhero movies, but also kind of American society in general. And to talk about Homelander for a second, he is kind of like the Superman analog, and acts in the public as a smiling American hero sort of thing. But in private, he is at any moment killing or maiming people or blackmailing them under threat to do so. So it kind of makes you think that if these Marvel or DC heroes really existed, like I said, what would really be happening behind closed doors? They'd kind of, be power hungry and, try to keep their power and everything. So he has this kind of like tough on crime approach. So he will kill like a petty criminal who obviously poses no threat to him at all, instead of taking them in, because he's like, oh, you're just going to commit a crime again. So it has this kind of like judge, jury, executioner sort of thing going. And in later seasons, this perspective kind of stands in for a certain politician. He's holding different rallies, and he's talking up the taco bowls in Vought Tower, being the best in the world. So showrunner Eric Kripke remarked in Homelander that all he ever wants to be is the most powerful person he can be, even though he's completely inadequate in his ability to handle it. So it's like what he says, it's white male victimization and unchecked ambition. And these issues just happen to reflect the guy who, it's still surreal to say this, was fucking president of the United States. His words. Eric Kripke's words, not mine. But in the comics it's based on...
You talking about Obama?
Yeah. But the comics it's based on were kind of... they came out in the early mid-2000s initially, and they were critical at the time of George W. Bush and his 9/11 policies. So it's kind of just been adapted from that time period to today. And it just, points at superhero comics and makes fun of them, American society, politics, foreign policy, and just corporate greed, and kind of like saying that, corporations saying that they support progressive causes when it's like very... what's the word I'm looking for? Not nihilistic, but anyway, what I'm kind of saying. So anyway, it kind of just goes much further in any kind of commentary in that sense than any Marvel or DC movie would.
Got it. Okay.
So it's trying to like shove politics down our throat, is what you're saying.
Some people say.
I'm sure someone could see that show and be like, you know what, that guy reminds me of someone, and I agree with his policies.
Well, I mean, yes, there are people that have done that. And
The Umbrella Academy, the show stands out for a number of different reasons that actually don't completely rely on the fact that there's a talking chimpanzee, there's a guy that's part ape, that becomes part ape, an alien adoptive father, time traveling agency that's run by a like robot with a fish inside of a fish tank for a head. So it's like this robot that has like a fish tank, and there's just like a goldfish swimming around. but it doesn't rely on that because those are kind of gimmicky, and that's kind of like just like the, outlandish factor for it. But the creator of the comics, Gerard Way, as everyone should know, is the lead singer and head person of My Chemical Romance. The comic book published from 2007 to 2009. It's won the Eisner and Harvey Awards. These are like big awards in the comic book industry. There's 3 volumes out. There was said to be a 4th volume that kind of gets into a little bit of what the show has already touched on or got into. The 4th one was going to be the Sparrow Academy, like kind of like a alternate version of the 7 adopted children, like just an alternate reality. He was going to write that book, but then MCR got back together, and then in 2019, and then COVID happened. I'm sure there was a lot of stuff that was going on with that. So, I mean, the show itself has a lot of like great scenes that, in my eyes, anytime a show that has like music that matches up to what's going on in the scene is just like perfect. Just a blend of music and, cinematic direction. And I feel like there's a lot of moments in the show that just really captures that. There's a scene where Cinnamon's playing while there's 2 people in masks, like these big goofy masks. They're like shooting up their house, and the family's kind of fighting them off. And Klaus, who's kind of like a somewhat ditzy character, that's he abuses drugs and he's kind of an addict, and he's troubled by seeing dead people around him, including one of his siblings that had died previously. He's haunted by his sibling, so he's got these issues. But in this scene, there's 2 people that are attacking the house. They're shooting up the place. He's got his headphones on, taking a bath. Cinnaman starts playing because that's what he's listening to. He like starts drying off, gets out. He's like dancing to the music. Meanwhile, his siblings are like fighting with these people throughout the house, and he's just kind of like skipping through because he's like in his own little world. One of the moments like from the show that really, touches me, like that really interests me, and it just kind of hits it really hard. But apart from, that, there's the artwork that really stands out. A lot of art by Gabriel Ba, as well as James Jean, who did artwork for MCR. So, I mean, there's just a lot of interesting aspects to the show and the comic book series. And it really includes the fact that it's a family. Like that's a big thing in the whole show and the whole series. They're siblings that have had a rough upbringing because they had this really strict father that was making them basically train to save the world.
All right, so I noticed that both of you had mentioned groups of 7 characters, and I kind of want to know how your respective 7 work together as a group. If you could describe how each character kind of fills certain roles, like leader, offense, or defense, and kind of how their powers might complement each other.
Okay, I'll let Moochie start with this, but I would object, for the record, with the form of the question. I mean, his show literally calls his people the 7. So I just think it's a little prejudicial, but carry on. Moochie, you go ahead.
So you're asking how well they work together as a team?
Yeah, and how they complement, their powers might complement each other.
I would say not well. Homelander is constantly trying to kill all of them.
Oh, okay.
Basically.
Yeah, he's kind of a douchebag, right?
Yeah. It's basically, I don't think you ever really see them working together as a team.
Oh.
For the most part.
Okay. I take back my objection because this question caters to me a little bit more, I would say.
Yeah, there's actually more teamwork.
So in the Umbrella Academy, with the show, they're assigned by numbers. So there's 7 of them, and they were assigned numbers. And number 1 is Luther, who's super strong. And he was, and is throughout the show, but was the leader type person because he's super strong and he's the oldest or whatever. But you don't see that in the show, considering it starts when they're adults and they've gone through, he's been battling with basically just what is my purpose in life. So when they were teenagers, when they were kids and they were doing these missions for their father, yeah, he was a leader, but he has to kind of regain that and kind of work through whatever issues he's got along with the rest of the family and, kind of work together. So it kind of sort of starts coming back, but not really, because he just kind of is one of the siblings. They, in terms of him and Allison, so him and number 3, they work together in that they kind of like each other, and it's kind of weird because they're, I guess they're not technically related by blood, but they're into each other. Klaus and Ben. So Ben is a character that had died in one of their missions when they were younger. So he's dead, but Klaus could see dead people. So through his addiction, through everything that he goes through, he's seeing one of the siblings. Nobody else could see him, except for, later on, he's able to materialize because of Klaus's powers. But they have a close connection because he's been able to see him after death. There's a couple points in the show that I'll just point out. They team up at the end of season 1, the finale, and it's similar to the comic books in that Vanya 7 is kind of like the big bad in the comics and the show. In the show, she kind of gets manipulated by this guy that sort of likes her, but he was like a fan. He was like a fanboy of the teens when they were doing their missions and they were superheroes. They were like kind of really famous, and he was like a fan, but he was like snubbed by them. I think he wanted to be one of them, but he wasn't. So he kind of manipulates her already like growing or like always present resentment because she didn't really have her power. She didn't really showcase her powers until way later. And that's why she does this tell-all book that basically just rats out the rest of her family because she didn't have powers, so she felt like the outsider, whereas the other siblings were always doing things because they had their powers. So he kind of manipulates her, and then season 1 is kind of like the finale of the White Violin, in that she plays a little concert with her violin and starts like basically destroying the world. Like the moon like breaks apart and like comes crashing down to Earth, and they're working as a team, fighting off different people and trying to work together to try to stop her from doing this. Ultimately, it doesn't pay off because they have to actually time travel to stop any of this. In the comics, it's a little bit different because Klaus gets like some superpowers and he's able to stop the moon rock from coming. Another example of them working together really well, season 2, episode 1. It's like an alternate version of them, the same characters, same people, where they're like fighting these like soldiers in like this Western looking town that looks like it's all been destroyed, but they're like fighting these soldiers, and every one of them, their powers like is super enhanced. So they must have like worked on their abilities or whatever, super enhanced. And it's like the way it's shot is really cool because it's like it'll go from one character doing something fucking badass and then shifts over to another who's also doing something like in collaboration with the other, going to another, and it's like going around the whole scope of the scenery, and they're all just like really well at what they're doing. Whereas season 1, they weren't doing that, and throughout the seasons, they're not really. They don't, as of yet on the show, they really don't even ever amount to what they do in that scene, which is really cool because, hopefully in this last season that they're coming out with, they'll get back to that and they'll actually showcase how good their powers could be and how well they could work together. But the whole show is kind of led up to what could be, and that was a really cool scene. So yeah, they could work together. They're a family.
Cool. All right. So at this point, we're going to be taking a brief recess. And during this recess, we're going to be doing a short segment that is called Refreshed Recollection. So in the legal world, in court, when you're trying to refresh a recollection, basically a party is going to show a witness a document in an effort to help the witness remember something. So they'll show the document to the witness, ask the witness to read it silently, and then ask whether the document refreshes their recollection. However, in this OTR debate section, we will not be doing that. Instead, I will
I was going to say it's completely different, I'm sure.
It's just the title.
I will be reading a few quotes from both of these shows, and the debaters will try to guess which show each quote is from. And there's going to be a bonus point for naming the character who said it.
Okay. Should we buzz in with like our names or something, or just go like?
Yeah, that's probably. Do you want to just flip back and forth? so that we don't.
There's only 2 shows. That was the one.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
You know what? It's going to be super easy because any quote that has an F-bomb every other word, it's automatic gonna. Go ahead. Just go ahead.
Let's see what happens. Yeah.
Okay. You could say boys, and you can say
Girls. Umbrella is harder. It's longer to say.
That's why you just say the first syllable.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. So number 1, don't look at the screen.
I'm trying not to.
Frogs are bitches, and we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Umbrella Academy.
All right. Do you know which character said that?
5.
It was Klaus.
Class.
So he only gets a point, but not a bonus point.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Second one is the whole point of what we do is that no one should have that kind of power.
Boys.
The boys? Oh.
Well, I mean, I guess it's
boys.
boys.
It's a Moochie.
I'll give it to whoever can name which character it was.
I don't know which character.
Can you repeat it?
The whole point of what we do is that no one should
I
have
got
that
it.
kind of power.
I got it.
Mother's Milk?
That's right. Damn. All right,
What
so
a name
that's-
too. Mother's Milk.
So that's 2-1, I think, so far. Okay, the next one is I don't think it's Morgan Freeman up there or anything, but it can't all be random.
Umbrella Academy.
No, it was not.
Oh.
Let me read it again because I did also misread it.
Well, that's why I got it wrong.
I don't think it's Morgan Freeman up there or anything,
It's the boys.
Oh, you can't do that.
but it all can't be random chaos.
So just the character's name, clearly, because I mean,
Well, I said but that wasn't how I was buzzing in. Boys. Can I, or do you want to guess the character since you started first? Go ahead.
Go ahead and guess.
go ahead. I don't know it.
I think it's Huey.
Yeah, that's right. And, he's right. It's not all random chaos up there, but it is all random chaos right here. So,
Segment.
all right. The fourth
3
and
to 1?
final
Taking a
one.
recess from court, so
3 to 2.
it's all good.
Yeah. All right. The last one is I am the daddy here.
Boys.
We just said boys
Yeah,
first.
he did.
Umbrella Academy?
Okay.
Umbrella Academy.
Boys Brella Academy.
And the only thing, I've only heard the names of the characters from this debate, so Vanya?
No, that's not okay. But
5.
it was Diego.
Okay.
All right. So
I think he gives daddy vibes. I think it's part of it.
I have no idea where the points are at. It doesn't really matter because it doesn't matter anyway. But
I think Moochie won, but we don't have to make it.
I did.
We don't have to make it canon.
all right, I think that's
I was keeping score.
long enough recess for all of us. So before we get back to our last question, just do us a quick favor and subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on TikTok while you can, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you're on. Just add us and give us a review. All right, so per usual, our third question is usually legal related. So today I'd want to talk about vicarious liability, which for our listeners and viewers who aren't familiar, vicarious liability is a form of liability that holds a person or a company responsible for the actions committed by others or by their employees. So do you think that VOT International or Sir Reginald Hargreaves, respectively, should be liable for the actions of their superhero teams?
Yes, absolutely. In VOT's case, because they're clearly employees of VOT. I mean, one of the defenses is that a lot of these companies say, no, they're independent contractors, even though they might have all the hallmarks of being an employee. But I think they're pretty clearly employees of them. And just to give one example of a circumstance where VOT
they
should
have
be
like
liable.
an office there and everything,
do,
right?
yeah,
They
they
have
actually-
all their.
yeah.
Cafeteria?
It's like
Yeah,
everything's
the whole
theirs,
building, yeah, it's
not
huge.
anything to do with independent contractors.
No,
Like,
no, it's not like they just come in every now and then and
Very
anything like that.
established.
So yeah,
Sorry.
very established there. So an example of this is early on. VOT sends Homelander and Maeve to stop this plane that was hijacked by 3 terrorists, and sends them to stop the terrorists. And it's kind of made to or done to show to the military that you can have superheroes in the military. Like they're trying to get military contracts, basically. But in the course of doing this, Homelander zaps one of the terrorists with his laser eyes and actually ends up destroying the cockpit. So the plane just starts going down anyway. and he decides to let everyone on the plane die. He doesn't save any of them and flies away. So Vought might argue, well, that was an intentional action, because intentional actions generally aren't covered under respondeat superior either, because if it's an intentional tort that someone's doing, the company's not going to, unless the company authorized it or retroactively took credit for it, essentially, like approved of it, they're not going to be liable. But it was all within the course of his employment. It was within the course of what he was employed to do. And a lot of what he was employed to do was to make kind of strategic decisions in the moment. So I think all of that would hold Vought still liable under respondeat superior.
Yeah. Okay. And it's like, he's really strong, right? What, like, has he never seen like a Superman comic or something?
Yeah, like
just fly the plane down,
or like bring it safely down to the ocean, maybe, or something. Yeah.
Or Iron Man, where he like linked everybody together. Do you remember that shit? He like, okay, we gotta work together, and he linked everybody together after falling out of a plane.
Well, Maeve is like, you remember, but she's like, oh, at least save these 2 kids. Like, you can carry them. And he's like, no, because they'll be witnesses to what I did.
Yeah.
So yeah,
his eyes start glowing. Yeah. He's like basically threatening them. Like,
he does. Yeah.
Yeah, he's such a piece of shit. So all right, so I know the question is geared more to like civil liability, right? Like in terms of the civil side and companies and stuff like that. But I'm going to bring it to, not to completely not answer your question and avoid it, but I'm going to bring it to the criminal world, because that's what I'm used to. Because it's also interesting. Jennifer and James Crumbly earlier this year became the first parents to be convicted for involuntary manslaughter after a jury found them guilty for basically their part in their child doing a school shooter. It was a school shooter thing. And so part of the evidence that came in involved, all these different signs where their son was going through mental health issues, and basically they should have seen this. They should have seen these warning signs and did nothing. Okay, so like evidence came in involving different quotes of his that he was writing down on his like notebook. His mom had bought him a gun as a gift, and there was images and like stuff that he was writing down that had, very troubling, very like concerning, that maybe they should have done something about, or at least looked into it. The case it's a landmark case, obviously. I mean, this is the first time it's been handled this way. And, people could look at it as maybe like a slippery slope, as, is this going to just start happening now? Or is, other people could say like, well, good, like, it should be something that the parents are held accountable for. And, maybe this is a deterrent. Maybe this is like something that'll open someone's eyes, or the parents' eyes, to kind of look closer as to what their kids are doing to make sure that this kind of stuff doesn't happen again. It's, in the situation with the Umbrella Academy, Hargraves, he like directs the kids to do these things. So like as they're completing their missions or whatever, if there's, he's just a private citizen. He is just a rich man telling his kids to go out and do something where potentially there's going to be damage. Potentially they're going to get in the way of police activity. Potentially they're going to get in the way of the military. Like, these are all things that is probably going to be involved in a lot of criminal charges, a lot of, responsibility, let alone all the civil stuff that comes with it, because, there's going to be a lot of organizations that are going to be dealing with, maybe trying to stop them, maybe trying to like, no, we've got it. And these kids are all of a sudden like trying to take over the situation and stop whatever crime's happening. So he's got bigger problems like prison. So.
All right. So now that I've heard from both of you on all 3 of my questions, would you like to close out? What's your closing arguments?
Sure.
No, just kidding. Go ahead, Mucci.
Well, I think we agreed as well beforehand that we were going to discuss the differences between the shows and the comics.
Yes.
Sure. So
that was a stipulation, an agreement between the parties.
Yeah. So I had a few of those. Basically, the comic is kind of edgelordy and kind of like in this era of like, who cares who we offend kind of thing, whereas the show has to adapt that kind of more of a just 15 years or so later, more modern kind of audiences and everything. So it tones down some things. It's not as like outwardly sort of problematic in a lot of ways, even though it does go far in terms of gore and violence in certain situations. That aspect that I just mentioned of the plane with terrorists in the comic, that was originally one of the September 11th planes. So it was like kind of a criticism of like obviously it wouldn't make sense to show that nowadays because you would have to set it in a specific time. Some other differences kind of involve the use of the heroes or the super powered people have been injected with this thing called Compound V, and in the show, which gives them their powers. In the show, there is this temporary V that gives you powers for a temporary period of time. So it's controversial among the boys, but two of them do end up using that on their own accord and get powers for like a day, essentially, and then have serious after effects to it. But in the comic, Butcher injects Huey with Compound V, a diluted version of it, immediately when like on his first mission. Basically, he's like, "Oh, you're gonna need this." So it's kind of like in the show, Huey has a choice, and he knows exactly what it is, and he chooses to take it, and it adds a lot of drama to the circumstance because he's dating Starlight, who is one of the seven, and she ends up being on the boys' side of things, trying to take down Homelander and stuff, and she's very opposed to him doing that. But he's like feelings of like, I need to be able to protect you, just as much as you protect me. I can't be the one getting saved all the time. He's very kind of self-conscious about that. And then speaking of Starlight, in the show, to put it delicately, she has a really terrible initiation to the team, and it's very trigger warning for anyone who's going to watch it, I would say. And what's done to her is done by this member called the Deep. And it kind of gives him a bit of a story arc where he goes through a very kind of quote unquote redemptive arc.
Redemption.
Even, I mean, but it's very like cynical and not like, he's not really portrayed as ever being a good guy because he's still like a stupid asshole by like season 3.
He just, he follows the trend of he needed to team up with a religious person who he'll be saved. And all of a sudden he's a good person because he found religion.
Right. So in the comic though, the person that does that to her is Homelander in their first scene together. So the scene where both of them are introduced, and also A-Train and Noir join in on it. But I think it was changed in some ways to give the Deep certain characterization, but to still have Starlight be very conflicted about joining the team and be very have a horribly rude awakening to kind of see how the team is not all it's cracked up to be, but also not to show Homelander being outwardly horrible right away, because the show kind of holds back ever so slightly on that to maybe it's the end of the first episode, or maybe it's the end of episode 2 or something, where you see that he is like doing some horrible things.
It's probably also like to show that it's not just Homelander, it's not just A-Train, because in the show, Homelander, he's doing some shitty stuff. A-Train fucking kills Huey's girlfriend.
That's what I was thinking too, because we already have a reason to hate A-Train.
Right. And so the Deep, otherwise, if not for that, what would we hate him for?
Yeah, because not the whole team's horrible, but pretty much all the men are horrible in the team. And then one of the women in season 2. Orlando knows what I'm talking about. Maybe the most horrible in some ways. But finally, one more thing that I want to mention is in the comics, one of the members of the boys that you meet is known as the Female. And that's her only name, the Female, or the female of the species. But you meet her right away with the team, and she's helping them out and everything. In the show, they rescue someone, and she is very violent. But one of the characters talks her down and forges a friendship with her. And she is actually given a completely different backstory, and finally given a name for the first time, and that's Kimiko in the show. One of the probably better characters, I think. At least more sympathetic.
Yeah.
So I think in general, like I said, the comic is kind of deliberately edgy and offensive and shocking for the sake of being shocking in ways that maybe didn't age well. So the TV series tones down a lot, but like just adapts it to more of a modern era. And a lot of the changes, I think, for the better, both in terms of that and just in terms of providing a satisfying story.
All right. So the difference is, because, that's what we've got here, between the comics and the show. In the comics, they have code names. So they have different names apart from 1 through 7 and their actual names. But what's interesting is that the code name that's given to Diego, number 3, he's the guy that has super aim. They call him the Kraken, like the underwater, thing, because he could hold his breath underwater like indefinitely, which is super different than anything the show portrays completely, because he's got no connection to the water. If anything, it would have been Ben with the like tentacle monster coming out of him. But he has that ability in the comics, and the show replaces it with not only can he like aim straight and or aim at what he's aiming at, but he could also, and it's portrayed later on when his powers get a little bit stronger, he can like do that thing that they did in the Angelina Jolie movie. I forget what it's called, but it's
Curving the Bullet.
Curving the Bullet.
Oh, Wanted?
Wanted with Professor Xavier.
McAvoy.
Yeah. So he could do that. So like if he throws something, he could change the trajectory of the object that he throws. So that makes sense, which completely different than the comic. Another difference in season 1, the ending of season 1, as I've already kind of mentioned, Vanya is the big bad. She's the big bad throughout. And she, in the comics, she's convinced to join this like evil orchestra by the conductor. And it's similar in that she like ends up at the concert hall, and she ends up doing the moon rocks are falling and everything. But she's shot by 5. She's paralyzed. And Klaus is able to stop it with some powers that he gains in that moment, and is able to stop everything. But the show, they have to travel back in time, completely changing everything. Then starts a new season where, as I mentioned, the scene where there's an alternate reality and they've got their powers. There's a lot of theme in terms of Klaus with his character arc and everything. He goes back when he goes back in time. He in the show, he goes to the Vietnam War. He fights in the Vietnam War. He falls in love with a soldier from Vietnam because he's pansexual, and so that's kind of like a somewhat relevant to the story. But he falls in love with a soldier, and that affects him throughout some of the show. But in the comics, Klaus, Diego, and Luther go back to. They're trying to go back to stop the JFK assassination by 5, who was set to kill JFK. So they go back in time, and they end up going back 3 years earlier. So they end up in Vietnam. So that's a little bit different. The Commission, which is that time traveling agency that employs 5, it's mentioned as like something he used to do in the comics, but in the show it's like really portrayed, and they actually have this whole. I think it takes over pretty much season 2. But the most important thing of the differences in all of this is that in the comics, the kids are all white and they're all straight. Mm-hmm. And it's like, come on, Gerard, like, what's going on? I mean, I guess it was a while back, 2007. So
yeah, in 2007, everyone was white and straight.
That's true. I mean, everybody knows that. So the show. So the show does a good job of. There's a diverse cast, right? So Ben is Asian. Mm-hmm. Allison is black. Klaus is pansexual, and so all that's great representation all around. Diego is Hispanic, and the last thing about the show that's different than the comics is that Vanya is a character throughout in the comics, and in the show, Vanya is a character. On the first 2 seasons, the actor transitions to Elliot Page before filming the third season. And so in the third season of the Umbrella Academy, we have Victor Hargreaves, and that, you know, obviously it comes from, you know, the actor's personal journey and goes into the show. So that's a difference from the comics as well.
All right. So getting into my verdict, as of today, I have not watched either of the shows, The Boys or Umbrella Academy. But based on both of things that you have all shared, I would really, you know, move both of these shows up on my long list of things to watch. However, I think I will put Umbrella Academy first before The Boys, just because it does seem like there's a lot more plot and storyline that I'd be interested in.
It's also, I think you would also like the lightheartedness of it. There's a lot of lighthearted moments in the Umbrella Academy. Like there's dance scenes where like, there's a scene in the first season where they come together for the funeral, and they're kind of like separated. They've been separated for some time, and they're all in their old rooms because it's a huge mansion. They're all in their old rooms, and the scene is like each one of them listening to the same song, dancing, but in different rooms, and it just kind of shifts throughout the mansion, and you just see like this dance compilation. It's like a great scene, and it kind of like that's kind of what the show is about.
It was like a musical dance scene in The Boys as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think my verdict has already been made, so I'll give it to Lando and Umbrella Academy.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. This has been OTR Debate.
Thank you.
Thanks.